Immediate divorce.
The ADM's role is over.
When I, at 50, got a job transfer abroad, my wife and daughter said such things to me. In the end, I was abandoned by my family and had to go abroad alone. However, 5 years later, having become an executive at a leading company and returning home with a black-haired beauty, my ex-wife and daughter ended up regretting their words and actions. My name is Steve Harris, and I turned 50 this year. In the spring when I turned 50, I was called by my boss who told me this.
Starting this year, you'll be assigned to our overseas branch.
What, starting this year?
Yes, ideally we'd send someone younger, but we really need someone who can contribute immediately.
The decision for the overseas transfer was somewhat forced, but I was a little excited. That's because it had been my dream to work abroad since I was young. I think it was just before I got married, around when I turned 30. I started dreaming of working abroad, in Japan. But, my Japanese was only at a middle school level, so I decided to start by studying Japanese, thinking about the future. Just when I was about to apply for a transfer, my daughter was born. I was 32 at the time. Having a child made the prospect of an overseas transfer too daunting. I couldn't leave my family behind in the US, and it seemed unfair to my wife to drag a newborn into an unfamiliar life abroad. So, I gave up on my dream. My wife, Grace, is a beautiful woman, 10 years younger than me. We met through a classmate and naturally grew close, and I married her when I was 30. Grace was still a college student at the time, only 20 years old. Although we weren't supposed to get married until she graduated, Grace strongly wanted to. So she dropped out to become a homemaker. I was making enough money that having children wouldn't be a problem. So I had no objections to Grace becoming a homemaker, and when our daughter Emily was born, I wasn't worried about money at all. From then on, our family life progressed smoothly until now. Grace is 40, Emily is 18. With Emily facing college entrance exams, I was anxious about telling them about the transfer. But since many college students live on their own, there was also the option of just Grace and me going abroad. However, there was one thing that slightly worried me. That was the sudden change in Grace and Emily's attitudes a few years ago. For some reason, they started being harsh towards me and even harassed me. I first noticed this about 7 years ago. Emily was a daddy's girl, so even in middle school, she often went out with me on holidays. Initially, Grace joined us, but about 7 years ago, she gradually stopped coming. Today Emily and I are going to the mall. You're coming, right?
Sorry, I have plans with a friend today.
Oh, really? You've been quite busy lately.
The kids are grown now, I have things I want to do.
Grace said that, but she began to leave home more often. Initially, it was 2 or 3 times a month, then gradually once a week, and at times, 3 times a week. Around this time, I started feeling that Grace's behavior was abnormal. Of course, I understand her desire to have fun. She married at 20 and had Emily at 22, so it's natural she might want to enjoy herself more. So at first, I let her go out without saying anything and didn't think it was wrong. But I couldn't tolerate the continuous overnight stays or her neglecting household chores. Grace had never worked since dropping out of college and apparently had never even had a part-time job while a student. She said she would try part-time work once Emily grew up, but she ended up just playing around. We weren't struggling for money, but I told her it would be good to experience working at least once, yet Grace wouldn't listen. Instead, she came up with this. When are you going to start working part-time? You're always just playing around, aren't you?
But I didn't get to have fun when I was young. Don't you feel sorry for me?
I do feel bad about that. But you can still have fun while working, right?
Oh, why did I even marry a guy like you?
At that moment, something inside me seemed to crumble and fade away. Maybe Grace no longer loves me. That thought crossed my mind. But once I'm certain of that, I don't know how I can go on living like nothing's wrong. So, I forced myself to stop thinking about it and just focused on working hard. That went on for several years, and Emily became a high school student. Even though she used to be daddy's girl up through middle school, she suddenly started avoiding me when she entered high school. Recently, a new cake shop opened near the station, so I bought some. You used to love cake, didn't you?
I'm busy right now. Can you just leave it?
Whenever I tried to talk, I'd get dismissive responses or feel like she didn't want me to speak at all. I was completely isolated at home. Grace still frequently stayed out overnight and neglected household chores. By that time, I was handling everything from laundry and cleaning to cooking. Work was also getting busier with important projects, and I was constantly working overtime. When I got home, housework awaited me. I'd wake up early to take care of the house, go to work, and then come home to more chores until I was too exhausted to stay awake. That was the kind of life I was living. Honestly, at that time, I think I was no longer capable of making sound judgments. It was clearly an abnormal situation, but I said nothing and just did what they asked.
Why is the food so plain? It's almost already made stuff.
Do you even care if our health gets worse?
I was trying to make things easier by preparing food in advance and adding ready-made dishes, and then I'd hear such complaints. Both Grace and Emily seemed to despise me, and I gradually started staying away from home more. Not coming home meant staying late at work or going to drinking parties I'd previously skipped. Even so, it was a storm of complaints from Grace and Emily.
What do you mean you're not coming home? What are you saying I should eat?
Mom can cook for you. Besides, you're in high school, why don't you try cooking yourself?
I absolutely don't want to cook. You should at least handle the chores properly.
Are you trying to dump that on me? Absolutely not.
Just for arguing back a little, there were days when they wouldn't speak to me. Despite everything, I continued to work properly, and gradually I started receiving higher positions. But I couldn't understand why the two of them treated me so poorly. I thought maybe Emily was just going through her rebellious teenage phase, but hearing about other families, it didn't seem to be just that. And I couldn't understand why Grace was so cold towards me. No matter how hard I tried to do something for the two of them, there was never any word of thanks. Instead, they only demanded more consideration. I was utterly exhausted by the situation, but then a turning point came. It was when my boss told me I was being transferred abroad. I was thrilled about the overseas job, a long-held dream of mine. But one worry lingered: would Grace and Emily come with me? I was aware of the poor relations within the family, and I knew they might even hate me. So, I was scared of how they would react when I told them about the transfer. On the other hand, I thought this could be a chance to mend our family bonds. The night I learned about the transfer from my boss, I immediately called Grace and Emily to the living room.
What's this about? I have things I want to do, so make it quick.
I want to head out soon too.
It'll be quick. Although I managed to get them to the living room, the outlook was not promising. They both seemed irritable, and revealing an overseas transfer at such a time. But I gathered my courage and decided to tell them. I've been assigned an overseas transfer. So, would you come with me? The moment I mentioned the overseas transfer, they froze. After a moment of thought, Grace turned to me with a smile. That's when I thought, maybe Grace still loves me. If she comes overseas, I'll make sure we live more comfortably. However, the next words from Grace plunged me into despair.
Immediate divorce.
What do you mean, divorce?
I would never go overseas with you.
Then what was that smile all about just now?
I can finally divorce you. I've got someone I'm interested in.
Someone you're interested in. Isn't that cheating?
I'm not cheating, just having some clean fun.
It was shocking. Indeed, there had been signs she could have been cheating all along, and I had known deep down. But I didn't want to believe that a woman I once loved could do such a thing. So, I had been turning a blind eye to reality. Then, Emily, who had been silent till now, suddenly burst into laughter and said,
ATM's role is over.
ATM? What are you suddenly talking about, Emily?
Didn't you know? We haven't liked you for a long time.
Emily, what's gotten into you? Far from coming with me on the overseas transfer, both confessed they found me burdensome. Moreover, Grace wanted a divorce because she was interested in someone else, and Emily was apparently in favor of it too.
Mom's new guy is nicer than you. I'm all for the divorce.
Have you met that man?
Of course. We went to the amusement park the other day, remember?
That day was so much fun.
Unexpected words flew back and forth, and I was nearly at a mental standstill. While I had anticipated they might not want to come with me on the overseas assignment, I never expected them to reveal anything more than that. Seeing the two of them talk about it so casually and without remorse was utterly repulsive. I guess they're not my family anymore. With that thought, my heart felt a bit lighter. All right, I'll pick up the divorce papers tomorrow.
Yay, now I'll be free.
I've been waiting for this day forever.
Feeling like I might lash out at them if I thought about it any further, I silently retreated to my room. The next day, I quickly went to get the divorce papers and began packing my things. I had no intention of returning to this house, nor did I have any regrets. After they had coldly said such harsh things, I would not look back. Months passed, and I moved abroad for the transfer. I had lived with Grace and Emily up until the transfer, but we hadn't spoken or seen each other at all. Grace might have been cheating, but now there was no way to know for sure. Though I should have demanded compensation, I was so disheartened that I left for overseas without taking any action. 5 years later, I suddenly had to return to the US. Living abroad, I had managed to pick up fluent Japanese and felt more competent at my job. I'm now 55, but going abroad has significantly broadened my horizons. The biggest lesson from the overseas assignment is that at 55, I still have plenty of challenges ahead. With these thoughts, I boarded the plane. After a few hours' flight, I arrived in the US and was looking at souvenirs in the airport, when I heard a familiar voice nearby.
Hey Mom, this looks tasty, doesn't it?
Oh yes, it does. Shall we buy it?
I'm curious about this one too.
We don't have that much money, so we'll have to pass on that.
Despite a sinking feeling, I turned towards the voice. To my surprise, there stood Grace and Emily, whom I had divorced 5 years ago. I was stunned to see them here, and it seemed they noticed me too.
Ha, why are you here? Did you follow us?
You, creepy, why would you follow us now?
As before, they said whatever they wanted, and whenever I tried to speak, they talked over me. No, this is.
Didn't you go abroad? Was that a lie?
Probably just bragging.
They chuckled and looked at me, continuing their conversation. Realizing it was pointless to say more, I decided to walk away from the scene.
Guess I hit the nail on the head, huh?
Do you still have feelings for Mom?
As I turned to retort, I saw someone approaching me at a brisk pace from afar.
Steve, sorry to keep you waiting. The restroom was so crowded. It took forever to get back.
It's busy at the airport, can't be helped. I was looking at souvenirs, see anything you like.
Boom. How about this? Doesn't it look delicious?
Let's go ahead and buy that then. The person who ran up to me was a woman with black hair and a model-like figure. Despite being casually dressed after a long flight, she still had a remarkable presence. I was talking calmly, but the two of them were standing there, dumbstruck by the scene before them.
Wait, who is this woman?
She's foreign, right? with black hair and black eyes.
Yes, let me introduce you. This is my new wife, Raina.
Nice to meet you. It's an honor to meet you.
Hearing the words, my new wife, the two exchanged glances. They probably never imagined I'd marry such a beauty.
Your new wife, you're with her. That's unbelievable, right? You think so too, right?
Unbelievable. She looks like a model.
I'm glad you would say something so wonderful, like comparing me to a model. By the way, Steve, who are these people?
Despite being introduced as my wife, they still seemed in disbelief. Raina asked about the two, but I hesitated on how to answer. However, it was better to be honest rather than hide anything. This is my ex-wife, Grace, and this is my daughter, Emily.
Oh, you mentioned you were divorced. You haven't been in touch since then?
That's right. We parted without alimony or child support. I hadn't demanded any compensation from Grace since I couldn't find any proof of her infidelity. And Grace had said she didn't want child support and wished to have no further contact. Since then, we hadn't had any interactions. I never thought I'd see them again, and here we are meeting in such an unexpected place.
Why are you married to such a beautiful woman? That's just weird.
What? Upset that the guy you look down on has a new wife?
There is no way. Don't be so full of yourself.
Grace had a habit of getting angry when hit with the truth, probably because I was spot on. But since Grace mentioned having someone she was interested in, she must be somewhat happy now. Just then, I felt my smartphone vibrating in my breast pocket. Pulling it out, I saw a call from my company. Sir, I've just arrived at the airport. Yes, I'll come over shortly. Excuse me.
From the president. Should I come too?
Yeah, maybe you should come along. Listening to our conversation, Grace and Emily seemed even more shocked. Their eyes widened as they looked at me.
Hey, do regular employees usually get calls from the president?
I doubt it. What does it mean that your wife is coming along?
Well, actually, I switched to a leading company in the industry over the past 5 years and became an executive. In fact, about 6 months after my transfer abroad, I switched jobs. There was nothing wrong with my previous company, but I wanted to aim higher. Looking back, I'm glad I made the switch. It led to me becoming an executive at the biggest company in the industry. My salary has increased so much it's incomparable to before. Plus, the benefits and other compensations are really good. The reason I came back to the US this time is that I got a position at the headquarters of my new company.
The biggest company in the industry. And an executive, what?
Everything has been going great since I met Raina, so I decided to try for a new job.
That's because you has been working so hard, Steve.
Raina has been a great support to me. Grace looked at me incredulously. Emily seemed unsure about the situation and looked anxious. How about you? Did you remarry?
Well, yes, we're happy, right?
Yes, we're happy.
I felt a bit of dissonance watching them repeat how happy they were. Truly happy people can be recognized by their expressions and aura. But they didn't seem happy, and they looked like they wanted to leave quickly.
Maybe we should go now.
Hey, what are you doing here?
When Grace pulled Emily's hand to leave our side, a man approached us. His familiar demeanor suggested he might be her new husband.
Sorry, I couldn't find where you were.
Wait, were you going to buy that? With my money?
No, I was going to buy it with my own money, but I'll stop now.
Grace, looking frightened, put back the item she was holding under the stern gaze of the man. And who might you be?
Ha, me. I'm Daniel, Grace's husband.
It hit the mark. She divorced me because she had someone else in mind, possibly this man. If that's the case, his taste is pretty bad. His attitude was clearly poor, and the way he looked down on Grace bothered me. Moreover, since this man arrived, Emily hasn't made eye contact at all.
Is he your former husband?
Yes, that's right. We just happened to meet.
Huh? Why don't you guys catch up on old times? I'm heading out.
With that, Daniel left the airport. I had no intention of talking to them now, and with Raina here, I was about to leave, but for some reason, Grace stopped me.
Can we talk for a minute?
If that's the case, I'll head to the hotel first. Let me know when you're done.
Got it. Then Grace, Emily, and I decided to talk at a nearby cafe. I didn't think there was anything to talk about, but what could they possibly want to say now? Once we were settled in the cafe and had ordered our favorite drinks, Grace began to speak.
Please, help us.
Help you? What do you mean? Does this have something to do with your new husband?
That man, he has money, but ever since we got married, he stopped spending on us.
Originally, Daniel was quite generous, and before they got married, he bought whatever Grace and Emily wanted. However, as soon as they remarried after our divorce, he suddenly stopped spending money. Brand name goods were out of the question, and he didn't contribute to the living expenses at all. So now, Grace and Emily are working hard just to make ends meet.
We're at our limit. If we work any more, we might just collapse.
I'm maxed out just paying for living expenses and student loans. I can't afford to live on my own.
They started passionately explaining how unjust their situation was and how hard they were struggling. Even if you say, help us, what exactly am I supposed to do?
Marry me again. It was better when I was with you.
What are you talking about? I already have Raina.
That doesn't matter. Just get a divorce.
This is absurd. Grace wants to leave her current husband but is afraid of being unable to support herself. She probably wants to remarry me, thinking I earn more now and she can return to being a homemaker. Even though she knows I'm remarried, she's not considering my situation at all. It's impossible to leave Raina and remarry you.
Then, could you at least give us some financial support? As an executive at a leading company, you must have plenty to spare.
Yeah, if you help us out financially, we could be happy too.
As soon as they realized remarriage wasn't an option, they just wanted money. Do they have any idea how hard I worked to get where I am? Even before our divorce, I thought they didn't appreciate the value of money, and 5 years later, nothing has changed. It feels even worse than before. They should have learned the value of money and how hard it is to earn it now that they are working themselves.
Please think of helping us.
You used to love me, right?
I left those feelings behind a long time ago. Why was I ever so desperate to earn money for these people? Thinking about it now, it all feels so empty, even though it's all in the past. Just as the waiter brought our drinks, I downed mine in one gulp and placed enough money for everyone's bill on the table before walking away from them.
Hey, where do you think you're going, leaving us like this?
Please don't abandon me.
They raised their voices in distress, but I didn't look back and walked away. As I left the cafe, Grace and Emily hurriedly paid their bill and chased after me.
Wait a minute, don't you have any compassion?
Yeah, I'm your daughter, aren't I? Don't you care at all?
That's exactly what I should be asking you. What do you think I felt 5 years ago? Hearing this, they fell silent. Maybe they feel a bit guilty. But for me, 5 years ago was an extremely difficult time. If they had shown even a little support, things might have been different. Instead, they did the opposite, pushing me further into despair. No matter what they say or what situation they find themselves in, I have no intention of helping them. Now, I have my work and a caring wife. This is probably the happiest time of my life, and I don't want it disrupted. I'm going now. We probably won't see each other again, but take care.
Wait, it was my fault. I'm sorry. Please come back.
Dad, help us.
As I walked away, cries of distress followed me. I wonder when was the last time Emily called me Dad. Though it made me a bit sad, I kept walking forward.
Dad, please come back.
I have no one else but you.
As I walked away, their voices gradually faded into the distance. Later, I ended up going out for drinks with a mutual friend of Grace and me.
Man, I was shocked when I heard you suddenly got divorced and went abroad. But it's good to see you're doing well.
Well, I was only there for about 5 years.
But catching a beauty and bringing her back, I never saw that coming.
We caught up over drinks and reminisced about the past, each of us downing about 5 beers. As we were getting tipsy and thinking of moving to another bar, my friend suddenly remembered to ask,
By the way, do you know what Grace is doing now?
"No, I haven't kept in touch at all."
She got divorced again. Heard it was quite the drama.
After that, Grace tried to divorce Daniel, but it was a huge mess. Daniel was adamant about not divorcing, and it almost went to court. However, Grace kept evading him by moving around until Daniel finally gave in and signed the divorce papers. Emily initially ran around with Grace but couldn't go far because she was working full-time. Eventually, she ended up renting a cheap apartment and living there. Of course, Grace lives there too. It's a single-occupancy apartment leased under Emily's name, but since they were living there together, I heard the landlord recently found out and evicted them.
After all, she's had a really tough life since she broke up with you.
Yeah, it sure has. But honestly, I'm glad we parted ways.
Well, you got a successful career and a beautiful wife out of it. So it's all cheers for you. Huh?
We continued our conversation as we headed to the next place. We entered a local bar, and there, Emily was working. She noticed me right after I recognized her. She came over to take our order with an awkward expression.
Welcome. What can I get for you?
"Why are you working here? Weren't you a full-time employee?"
Being full-time doesn't cover all my expenses.
Apparently, after being evicted from the apartment meant for one, they started living in a proper apartment for two. However, the rent was higher than before, so their previous earnings weren't enough to cover living expenses. "How's Grace doing? Is she working properly?"
Mom is juggling several part-time jobs.
According to Emily, Grace is indeed working. She has no experience as a full-time employee and, at 45, there seems to be no full-time positions available for her. As a result, she's juggling part-time jobs at convenience stores, supermarkets, variety stores, and diners. I wondered if she could actually handle juggling so many jobs, but apparently, she's been repeatedly late. She works late into the night and then heads to another job the next morning, so she often oversleeps due to not getting enough sleep. Additionally, her poor schedule management skills mean she can't keep track of her shifts properly. Repeated tardiness has even led to her being fired on occasion. Still, there are always places to work, so she's not struggling to find jobs. But isn't she going to run out of places to work eventually?
It's already looking bad. Please, can you give me some money secretly? Just a little.
Grace's hourly wage has been decreasing with each new part-time job. So she asked me for money to help, but the bar owner overheard and scolded Emily right there.
I'm sorry. I won't do it again.
Despite her apology, it turns out she had been doing the same thing to other guests, and the owner sternly told her she wouldn't work there anymore. Emily left the bar, head down and dejected. On the way back, I saw Grace coming to pick up Emily. Her hair, which used to be well kept and beautiful, was now unkempt, and she looked older than me. It's frightening how much a person can change based on how they live. At the same time, that day affirmed my belief that what you do comes back to you eventually. Since then, I've made it a point to treat people with sincerity. A year after returning to the US, I've adjusted to working at the US headquarters. Though it's only been 5 years since I worked abroad, initially, I couldn't shake off the overseas work style. But after a year, I realized that working in the US suits me better. I once aspired to work abroad, but ultimately, the US is the best fit for me. However, I truly value my overseas experience. Reina, although living in the US for the first time, had visited several times before and speaks English well. She adapted quickly and is savvy with neighborhood relations. Reina, unlike Grace, is a homemaker, but starts her day earlier than me, prepares breakfast, and keeps the house impeccably clean. She also tries to keep the grocery bills low by shopping at distant but reasonable supermarkets and cooks a variety of meals. I look forward to coming home every day. Previously, I used to dawdle on the way home to avoid it, but now I make no detours. I am determined to work even harder to protect this life I have now.